Chapter 531 Victory in North Aridlands. Your Majesty, it's quite late now. Please rest early, Senior General Quinton Hans advised. My soldiers are still fighting on the front lines. How can I sleep? Balthazar sighed as he shook his head. Your Majesty, you're the hope of Diatoran. You shouldn't tire yourself out because of the war. It's not worth it, Quinton urged. General Hans, that's enough. I want to personally oversee the battle here to prevent any unexpected incident. It would be easy for me to give orders immediately if anything happens, Balthazar said with a firm gaze. At these words, Quinton refrained from saying more. Meanwhile, in North Aridlands, Vadesia and Estrya launched relentless attacks against the border. General Ziko Granger led his troops and engaged in a fierce battle with the enemy beyond the border. The casualties on both sides were severe, and the enemy seemed well prepared for the confrontation. The sounds of gunfire echoed continuously near the command post. However, Ziko showed no intention of retreating. General Granger, the enemy's attacks are too fierce. We may not hold on for much longer. The reinforcements haven't arrived yet. Why don't we withdraw from the border first and come up with a plan? Our forces might be entirely defeated by the enemy at this point, an adjutant advised. Absolutely not. We must follow Lord Caspian's command and hold our ground here. We must obliterate the enemy once the reinforcements arrive. Diatoran would be at stake if we leave, and Lord Caspian's plan would be ruined. So, we must hold our ground at all costs, Ziko declared firmly. Initially, he followed Caspian's strategy of launching a three-sided attack and gained an absolute advantage in the first half hour of the battle. However, given the disparity in strength, the enemy regrouped and initiated a furious counterattack. Now, Diatoran was struggling and had to deploy troops from the Central Plains while awaiting reinforcements. Champion Benjamin isn't here, so I'm the battle commander. How can we retreat now? I won't leave even if I die in battle. If the reinforcements don't arrive in time, I will lead the troops out to buy time for Diatoran. Ziko's eyes were resolute. Seeing his determination, the adjutant refrained from persuading more. What's happening? Reinforcements should have arrived by now, the adjutant anxiously inquired. The reinforcements' base is a distance away, and the path is rugged and uneven. It will take some time for them to arrive, but it will be soon. Ziko glanced at his watch. After he said that, a loud gunfire suddenly erupted in the distance. This instantly disrupted the enemy's formation. They were taken by surprise as numerous troops appeared on the flanks. The gunfire caught them off guard. From the monitor, Ziko saw that the reinforcements had arrived and surrounded the enemy from left and right until they had nowhere left to run. Upon seeing the reinforcements, Ziko and all his subordinates were invigorated. Now, they could launch a fierce attack without any reservations. The joint forces of Vadesia and Estrya were about to break through, but were caught off guard by the sudden appearance of numerous troops on the flanks, making them powerless to fight back. There weren't many soldiers to begin with, and now, they were truly hopeless with the sudden emergence of reinforcement from Diatoran. They were defeated in a few minutes. The tens of thousands of troops from Central Plains had unleashed vigorous attacks on the enemy team. Ziko smiled with joy at the sight. He had finally awaited this moment. The battle continued for nearly an hour, and the enemy began to retreat. Once their momentum dropped, it would be impossible for them to continue the attack. Chase after them! Don't let them escape! Ziko ordered as soon as he saw the enemy attempting to flee. He was prepared to lead the charge himself. The local army, combined with the tens of thousands of reinforcements, had all rushed out, leaving the fleeing enemy with no chance to resist. They discarded their armor and weapons in surrender. The field was littered with enemy corpses. In East Aridlands, the naval forces of Estrya launched an attack on Diatoran. The naval forces in East Aridlands struggled to resist the attacks since a portion of their forces had gone to support the South Aridlands and had yet to return. The battle here was also intense. Various types of aircraft took off and hovered over East Aridlands as they were ready to join the fight at any moment. Once the opportunity arose, these aircraft would deal a heavy blow to Estrya. The underground missile silo had begun operating and was launching attacks toward Estrya's forces. At the same time, the reinforcements from the Central Plains had arrived in East Aridlands and were ready for war. Once the enemy approached, they would spare no effort to crush them. Now, all that remained was to wait for the arrival of ships and aircraft from East Aridlands to their designated positions to repel the enemy. In the West Aridlands War Zone, it was 4:00 a.m. When Quinton saw the fatigue on Balthazar's face, He hurriedly advised, "Your Majesty, it's very late now. Please rest. I can handle the command. Here. If you fall sick, it will be detrimental to Diatoran. All right, I'll head back to rest. Report me immediately if anything happens." Balthazar had been commanding the battle continuously for a day and a night. This was the most tiring he had been in recent years. Previously, he had entrusted military matters to Caspian, so he didn't need to worry. However, this time was different. He needed to oversee the battle personally. Diatoran was now surrounded on all sides, facing an unprecedented crisis. "Understood," Quinton saluted. Afterward, Balthazar led his troop and was ready to head back to his mansion in the West Aridlands. The king was, after all, the head of Diatoran. His fate was closely tied to the kingdom's destiny. The guards were his closest companions. They were elite warriors tasked with ensuring Balthazar's safety. "General Zonia, the situation in South Aridlands is extremely intense. I think you should lead a troop and head to West Aridlands to support Champion Dax. If anything were to happen in West Aridlands, the entire Diatoran would be at risk." After the king left, Quinton commanded Ferb. "General Hans, the command in West Aridlands is under the direct control of the king. Since His Majesty hasn't given me any orders, I can't leave this place," Ferb replied. Chapter 532 Preconceived Plans. "I'm a senior general, and you're just a general. Now that His Majesty has gone to rest, I'm in charge here. Are you defying orders?" Quinton said bluntly. "The troops in the West Aridlands War Zone are already engaged in border combat, making the internal forces in the war zone limited. If I take my troops to support, the war zone will become empty. I'm afraid this will put His Majesty in danger," Ferb explained. "I'm here in the war zone. What are you afraid of? Aren't my troops strong enough?" Quinton disdainfully retorted. "But if the enemy knows there are no forces inside the war zone and launches a sudden attack, it will be dangerous. His Majesty only has a few guards here. You and your troops won't be enough to fight against the enemy if they were to attack," Ferb argued. "The enemy is currently engaged in border combat. How could they ambush us here? Our aircraft have been monitoring the enemy, and they have no chance. General Zonia, are you afraid to fight and choose to be a coward? His Majesty has given the order that whoever runs away from battle will be faced with the death sentence," Quinton said. "Of course I'm not afraid to fight. I'm just concerned about His Majesty's safety. Regardless, I will stay here to protect His Majesty." Ferb expressed his unwavering loyalty to the king. He didn't want to leave, fearing for Balthazar's safety. Currently, there were only 2 groups of soldiers in the West Aridlands War Zone. If he took his troops away, only Quinton's troops would remain. If he stayed, he could still control Quinton, but the king would be in danger if Quinton were to turn against them while he was away. Though the guards around His Majesty were formidable, their numbers were limited. The king was the lifeline of Diatoran, and should not be put in any danger. "Are you stupid? I told you I'll stay here. Nothing will happen to His Majesty." "Are you trying to go against me?" Quinton said impatiently. "What if someone in your troops has ulterior motives and wants to harm His Majesty?" Ferb had long felt that Quinton was suspicious, but he couldn't exactly figure out why. Besides, his rank wasn't as high as Quinton's. However, he had no evidence to support his suspicion, so he couldn't say anything. "Bastard! What do you mean? Do you think I'll betray my country?" Quinton was enraged. "I dared not say that. I didn't say you're unloyal to the country, but I think your troops might," Ferb quickly explained. "Nonsense. My troops have undergone rigorous training and were carefully selected. Each of them is loyal to His Majesty," Quinton shouted. Ferb dared not argue further and remained silent. "As a senior general, I now order you to immediately lead your troops to reinforce," Quinton sternly commanded. "I must report this to His Majesty first," Ferb insisted. "His Majesty hasn't rested for 24 hours. I'm in command now." "Are you going to disobey my orders?" Quinton pressured. "I dare not," Ferb replied. "Then, what are you still standing there for? Hurry up and take your troops to the border. The front line in West Aridlands is under heavy gunfire. The reinforcements from the Central Plains have yet to reach. If Diatoran loses the war because of you, you'll become the biggest sinner in Diatoran. By then, everyone will despise you." "Understood," Ferb nodded as he could only comply. Ferb took his subordinates and left the West Aridlands War Zone. As soon as Ferb left, Quinton immediately convened a meeting with his troops. "Everyone, Diatoran is attacked from all sides. How long do you think this battle will last? What insights do you have?" Quinton asked the crowd. Quinton had long been bought off by Filren. Filren had offered very tempting conditions to Quinton. If he were to collaborate with them, capture the king, and assist Filren to enter West Aridlands, he would be made the king of West Aridlands once they achieved victory. This was a golden opportunity for Quinton since only his troops remained in the war zone at the moment. So, he wanted to strike while the iron was hot. However, he didn't know what his subordinates were thinking, so he asked for everyone's opinion. If anyone were to oppose, he could directly kill them to ensure that everything was smoothed out before proceeding to the next step. Upon hearing Quinton's question, everyone sighed. I think Diatoran is doomed. I'm afraid the enemy will finally get to us this time. Quinton's confidant spoke first. I share the same view. Diatoran may fall as we are currently surrounded by enemies on all sides. There's no certainty of victory. Besides, all four directions, east, west, south, and north are already in a struggle. We will undoubtedly be defeated if we continue. Another close aide of Quinton stated. Exactly. The situation here in West Aridlands is the most terrible. Filren has strong military power, and we won't be able to hold on for a long time. At that moment, a soldier named Brax Jr. stood up and said firmly, Diatoran is vast and rich in resources and talented individuals. Although we're surrounded by enemies on all sides, I believe in the strength of our nation to resist the attacks of these countries. Victory will eventually belong to us. Upon hearing Brax's words, Quinton's expression turned stern. Haha, I want to know how Diatoran can repel the enemy. With enemies on all sides, Diatoran will be caught in a pincer attack if any side is breached, which leads to unimaginable consequences. Another one of Quinton's trusted aides added. The latest intelligence report indicates that North Aridlands has already won. The situation there is now stable. As for South Aridlands, since Lord Caspian is commanding the battle, they wouldn't lose. Meanwhile, the situation in East Aridlands is a bit precarious now, but once our troops and warships arrive, we can reverse the situation. As for West Aridlands, the reinforcements are on their way. As long as they arrive in time, Filren will never break through our defense line. By then, we can launch a counterattack and repel them without any problem. Brax carefully analyzed the current situation. Nonsense. North Aridlands did win, but the enemy is likely to regroup and launch another attack. We won't be able to withstand it, a general said. Realizing something was amiss, Brax stood up and shouted, What do you mean? Everyone here is a general in Diatoran. We should believe in our country, right? Do you want to become a traitor and side with the enemy? Chapter 533 Rebels. Brax, you're not foolish. Since you've noticed something, I'll be straightforward. Do you want to join us? Quinton walked toward Brax as he spoke. General Hans, we are all soldiers of Diatoran whose duty is to defend our homeland. We cannot run away just because our country's in a dangerous situation. If I do that, I will become the traitor of the nation and despised by all, Brax passionately declared. Seeing his firm attitude, Quinton decided not to waste time persuading him and took out a gun, then aimed at Brax. A gunshot echoed, startling everyone in the meeting room. Brax had no time to defend, and he collapsed onto the table. Seeing this, everyone was shocked and uneasy. At first, there were some generals who wanted to oppose Quinton, but after witnessing this scene, they dared not speak further. Quinton had killed Brax there, and then to set an example and intimidate the others. His actions afterward were risky, and he needed to ensure the loyalty of his subordinates. It would be dangerous for him if news of his rebellion got out. The news of Quinton taking control over the king of Diatoran would surely shock the world. Hence, before starting the rebellion, he had to make sure everything was foolproof to avoid any unexpected incidents. In this urgent situation, Quinton had no intention of saying more. Anyone unwilling to stand by his side would be eliminated on the spot. Anyone else have a different opinion? Quinton coldly asked. Most of his subordinates were trained by Quinton, so there was no objection. Even so, everyone dared not express their dissatisfaction after witnessing Brax's fate. I am willing to follow General Hans' orders. I am willing to follow General Hans' orders. Several soldiers stood up and shouted in unison. Seeing that everyone agreed without objections, Quinton said, Good, very good. Diatoran is in danger, but I have a way out for all of us. What's the way? Senior General, please make it clear, a general asked. Attack the king's mansion and hand him over to Filren, Quinton declared. At these words, the hearts of those present trembled. This was a heinous crime. These subordinates guessed that Quinton harbored rebellious intentions, but they didn't expect him to be so bold. Capturing the king would throw the entire Diatoran into chaos. It would even collapse the country's front lines. Since Diatoran was facing enemies in all 4 areas, the 5 war gods would undoubtedly rush to the rescue if the king was in danger. By then, all their effort would be in vain. Some subordinates were reluctant, but seeing Brax's dead body on the ground, they realized they had no choice. Anyone who dared to oppose Quinton would face death. Seeing their concerns, Quinton persuaded. "Don't worry. All the troops in the war zone are now on the front lines. Only we are left here. The king has only a few guards by his side, which are no match for us." Upon hearing his words, the tension in everyone's hearts somewhat eased. He was right. There were no other forces left in West Aridlands. There is no room for hesitation when undertaking such a great endeavor. Now, there's a rare opportunity in front of us. As long as we capture the king and hand him over to Filrin, we will become heroes of Filrin once they achieve victory. By then, everyone will receive generous rewards, and your status will also rise, Quinton added. Upon hearing this, everyone turned eager. Then, a general stood up and said, "All right, I am willing to obey the general's orders. We will accomplish a monumental feat together. I am willing, too. Diatoran is in great danger now, and there's no room to retreat. The nation will still be doomed even if we fight to the death. We might as well plan an escape for ourselves in advance." Seeing that someone had stepped forward to express their stance, the others had no objection. They all nodded in agreement. Otherwise, they might not even be able to walk out of the meeting room alive. "Good!" Quinton was pleased to see everyone had agreed. He immediately said, "We must act swiftly. First, let's come up with a plan and then take immediate action."
"Yeah!" everyone shouted in unison.
Quinton sat down and began discussing the next steps and the negotiation with Filrin with everyone. At 4:30 a.m., in the king's mansion. At this time, silence reigned, and the surroundings were quiet. The guards were patrolling the perimeter. Suddenly, in the dark of the night, a large group of people rushed toward the king's residence. "Stop right there! What are you doing?" the chief guard officer sternly shouted. These people were suspicious to appear at this hour. When the other guards heard the commotion, they immediately entered combat mode. However, those people showed no intention of stopping as they continued to approach the king's residence. The chief guard didn't hesitate and immediately ordered, "Attack! Eliminate these people!" The guards immediately opened fire as soon as they saw a potential threat. Their duty was to protect the king's safety. Anyone who threatened the king's safety would be killed. Gunfire erupted instantly, and the two groups clashed in battle. Since it was dark, the guards couldn't clearly see who the group of people were. However, it was evident that these people were well prepared, and their target was the king. The guards were strictly selected and equipped with advanced weapons. As the approaching group continued to close in, the chief guard, Lyndon Gorp, recognized they were Quinton's subordinates. Lyndon was extremely shocked to see them. Quinton led his men and charged into the king's mansion aggressively. It was evident that he intended to betray the country. "This is bad. Quinton's troops are rebelling. We must stop them at all costs and protect the king's safety," Lyndon shouted. The guards were alarmed upon hearing Lyndon's words. Quinton was a senior general with an army of 2 million soldiers. Meanwhile, there were only about 20,000 guards. They simply couldn't fight against Quinton's troops. However, the guards' mission was to protect the king. They had to charge forward even in the face of danger. They were willing to sacrifice their lives to protect the king. Gunfire and explosions filled the air outside the king's mansion. Cries of agony echoed continuously as an indeterminate number of people perished instantly. Quinton deployed his elite forces and mobilized dozens of tanks. The guards stood no chance of withstanding such an assault. Although the guards were equipped with advanced weapons, they were only light weaponry and couldn't compare against Quinton's weapons. Hence, it was impossible for them to stop him. At this moment, the king, who was sleeping, heard the commotion outside. Lyndon rushed in anxiously and shouted, "Your Majesty! Quinton has betrayed the country!" Chapter 534 changes. What? Quinton betrayed the country? The news hit the king like a thunderbolt. He had never imagined that Quinton would defect to the enemy. "Exactly. Quinton and his subordinates have surrounded us," Lyndon urgently reported. "Where's Ferb? Get him to save me!" The king remained calm, showing little panic. He quickly remembered that Ferb's troops were also stationed there. There were only Quinton's and Ferb's troops stationed in West Aridlands. Ferb was the only hope for breaking the siege. "Your Majesty, the situation is critical. The guards will soon be defeated. When that happens, Quinton's forces will break through. General Zonia won't be able to rescue you in time. Let's leave through the secret passage, Lyndon suggested urgently. There was a secret passage built in the king's mansion for this type of situation. I am the king of Diatoran. How can I escape in such a pathetic manner? My reputation will be tarnished if word gets out. Instruct Ferb to provide assistance at once, the king said. Your Majesty, General Zonia is only a general with merely 100,000 soldiers. It's unlikely that he could beat Quinton's forces. Let's leave first and then decide, Lyndon advised. No need. Let Ferb assist. Although his forces are limited, we can besiege the rebels once they form a pincer attack with the guards, the king commanded. Yes, Your Majesty. Lyndon dared not disobey the king and immediately called Ferb. At this moment, Ferb and his subordinates were already on the way to the border for battle. General, Chief Lyndon is on the line. A deputy rushed to Ferb. Hearing this, Ferb suddenly felt an ominous feeling. A call at this time likely meant trouble. Chief Gorp, are you looking for me? Ferb asked. General Zonia. That bastard Quinton has betrayed the country. His troops are attacking the king's residence now. The king has ordered you to come to the rescue immediately, Lyndon urgently conveyed. Ferb was immensely shocked to hear this. Ferb had sensed something was off with Quinton. It seemed that Quinton was purposely making him leave earlier on. Although Ferb was reluctant, he had to obey Quinton's orders as he had a lower rank. Unexpectedly, right after his departure, Quinton had attacked the king. That bastard sure had the guts. Chief Gorp, I've already left the war zone. It may be too late for me to return in time, Ferb said with frustration. What? Why did you leave without authorization? Lyndon exclaimed. Quinton lied to me and tricked me into leaving. I had no choice, Ferb explained. Enough of that. Return immediately and rescue the king. This is the king's order, Lyndon urged, not wanting to waste any more time. Yes. Ferb couldn't afford to waste time. He hung up and addressed his subordinates. Quinton has betrayed the country. They are trying to take down the king. We must rush back for the rescue. Upon hearing this news, the troops were shocked. The king was in danger, and they had to rescue him. Yes, the soldiers shouted in unison. With that, Ferb led his troops and hurried back. After Lyndon hung up the phone, he reported to the king, Your Majesty, General Zonia was tricked by Quinton and has already left the war zone. He is on his way to the border. What? Is that so? The king was surprised by this revelation. Yes, Quinton must have planned this for a long time. He intentionally sent away General Zonia and then besieged you, Lyndon explained. This is absurd. Quinton's crimes are unforgivable. The king expressed his anger. Your Majesty, I've asked Ferb to come immediately. I think we should escape through the secret passage now, Lyndon suggested. It's too late. Quinton is more familiar with the geography here than I am. He definitely knows about the passage, the king said. At this moment, the fight outside was getting more intense. Just by the sound of the gunshots, one could tell that the guards had no chance against Quinton's troops. Your Majesty, the traitors will rush in at any minute. We'll be in danger if we don't leave now, Lyndon said urgently. Don't rush. Call Lord Caspian. I have something to tell him, the king ordered. Yes, Your Majesty. Lyndon dared not to hesitate and dialed Caspian's number. Meanwhile, in South Aridlands. Commander, the main forces of Estrya and Vadesia have arrived, but they've started retreating under our great resistance, the North Aridlands champion, Benjamin, reported excitedly. Good! Go after them immediately! We must destroy the enemy! Caspian was thrilled. Just then, a deputy hurriedly ran in. Commander, urgent message from the king. When Caspian heard this, his face darkened. A call from the king this time indicated a matter of great urgency. Without hesitation, he answered the phone. Your Majesty, what's the matter with the urgent call? Caspian inquired. Lord Caspian, Quinton has betrayed the country, the king declared. What? Quinton has betrayed the country? Caspian exclaimed in shock. As the Diatoranian god of war, Caspian knew about Quinton's identity. He was a senior general with 200,000 troops. Now, amid a critical situation in West Aridlands, he had chosen to betray the country. Yes. He brought his subordinates to attack me. The guards won't be able to hold on much longer, the king said. Upon hearing this, Caspian finally understood the situation. Quinton wanted to capture the king. Your Majesty, I'm too far away to provide immediate assistance. Inform other generals in West Aridlands to come to your rescue, Caspian suggested. Filren is attacking at the border, and all the soldiers in West Aridlands have gone to assist in the front line. There's no one left to rescue me. What? Your Majesty, you didn't leave a troop behind? Caspian was surprised. Initially, Ferb was also here, but Quinton deliberately sent him away while I was resting. The king's voice sounded anxious. Caspian could sense the intense battle outside through the other end of the line. Your Majesty, what should we do now? Please give your orders, Caspian asked urgently. Chapter 535 The King is in danger. Caspian's mind quickly worked, and he spoke immediately. Oh, Your Majesty, you should leave through the secret passage first and then make plans. We must not let Quinton succeed. Lord Caspian, it's too late. Quinton knows about the secret passage. I'm afraid I'm in danger, the king answered. Your Majesty, you must not fall into Quinton's hands. He will undoubtedly hand you over to Filren, and then Diatoran will be in jeopardy, Caspian urgently conveyed. Lord Caspian, if I am captured by the rebels, you will be the next king. At that time, you will lead the country to continue to fight and defend Diatoran, the king declared. Your Majesty, I have no qualifications to become the king. I cannot take your place. Caspian had never thought of being a king. Even when he was at the peak of his military accomplishments, such thoughts never crossed his mind. I've already told you that you'll take over my position if something happens to me. Diatoran cannot be without a leader. You must take over and lead the army. Diatoran mustn't fall at the hands of both of us. This is an order, and you must obey. The king suddenly spoke with seriousness. Your Majesty, Caspian was somewhat at a loss for words. You must promise me. If something happens to me, you must take command of everything. The king insisted. Your Highness, let's not talk about this now. You must find a way to leave through the secret passage, Caspian said. All right, let's see if I'm lucky. If I can't escape my fate, you must follow my orders, repel all enemy forces, and protect the land of Diatoran with its people. With that, the king hung up. Your Highness, let's go quickly, Lyndon urged. Okay, let's leave through the secret passage. The king didn't want to fall into the hands of the enemy, so he could only take a risk now. Lyndon took the king into the bedroom. There was a hidden secret passage behind the bookshelf in the room. After they entered the passage, the bookshelf returned to its original state, looking normal from the outside. Lyndon led the king through the secret passage, and the exit happened to be a back mountain in West Aridlands, South Aridlands War Zone. After Caspian learned about Quinton's betrayal and the siege of the king, he was now extremely anxious. Benjamin saw Caspian's change in expression and asked curiously, "What happened, Commander?" "We had a little victory here, but something unexpected happened on the king's side," Caspian said. What happened to the king?" Benjamin asked urgently. "Quinton suddenly betrayed the country. He's now leading his subordinates to attack the king," Caspian explained. "What? That jerk Quinton dared to betray the country?" Benjamin was shocked by this news. "The situation is very urgent now, and Diatoran is in great danger." Caspian's expression gradually became more serious. "Commander, what should we do? Please give the order," Benjamin asked. "I will lead an elite team to rush to West Aridlands immediately to rescue the king," Caspian declared firmly. "Commander, you don't need to say much. The king is in trouble, and as the Diatoranian god of war and one of the 5 war gods, I must rescue his majesty," Caspian said. Hearing this, Benjamin began to grow worried. After all, South Aridlands was hundreds of miles away from West Aridlands. It would probably be too late when Caspian reached there. "I know what you're thinking. It's indeed a bit late to go now. The purpose of my trip is to rescue the king from Quinton's hands. If Quinton succeeds, he will definitely hand the king over to Filren, and Filren will use his highness to threaten us. What I can do now is to prevent Quinton from handing over the king. Otherwise, the entire Diatoran will be in danger," Caspian said. "But do you have a plan to save the king?" Benjamin asked. "I have already figured it out. I'm going to lead the armored battalion to West Aridlands to rescue the king." Caspian already had a complete plan in his mind. "What do I need to do?" Benjamin asked. "After I leave, you will command the battle in South Aridlands," Caspian instructed. "I also want to go and rescue the king," Benjamin said excitedly. "No. Although South Aridlands has gained a temporary victory, the enemy may launch a counterattack. So, you must stay here and command," Caspian said firmly. "As one of the 5 war gods, I can't turn a blind eye now that the king is in trouble, right?" Benjamin said urgently. He was very concerned about the king's safety as well. The greatest contribution you can make now is to protect South Aridlands. If we lose, the entire Diatoran will be on the losing end. The king is most worried that if all 5 war gods simultaneously go to rescue him, it will lead the enemy to launch a fierce attack, as the borders are unguarded. The more critical the situation, the calmer we must be, Caspian said calmly. I understand. I will rely on you to save the king. Rest assured, I will guard here, Benjamin said. Good. I will rescue the king. You follow the original plan and make sure to hold the position, Caspian instructed. Commander, please rest assured. I will definitely hold the position. I am more worried about the king now. It is a dangerous matter, even if you're involved. Benjamin expressed his concern. Regardless, I will make sure the king is safely rescued. At this moment, the guards in the king's residence fought desperately. However, the difference in both troops' strength made it impossible for them to resist. Now, with more than half of the guards dead and injured, the rebels had already broken into the king's residence. However, after searching thoroughly, they found no trace of the king. Quinton knew there was a secret passage in the residence, so he ordered someone to place a bomb in the king's bedroom. Once the bomb exploded, the group discovered a secret passage amidst the rubble. They rushed in instantly. Lyndon was escaping with the king when he heard the noise coming from behind. Your Majesty, they're chasing after us. You go first, I'll hold them off, Lyndon said in surprise. He had long anticipated this situation and was prepared to fight at any time. No, you're not their match. Come with me, let's escape from here first, the king said. He certainly didn't want to see Lyndon sacrifice himself in vain. Chapter 536 Surrender. Your Highness, you go first. Don't worry about me, Lyndon urged. The enemy was catching up, and the only thing he could do now was to buy time for the king. No, I'm not familiar with the secret passage. You must go with me. Balthazar knew that if Lyndon stayed behind to fight the rebels, his fate would be death. So, he came up with an excuse to have Lyndon follow him. All right, Your Majesty, let's go out together. Lyndon nodded. He couldn't leave the king alone in such an unfamiliar place. Balthazar was a middle-aged man. Although he had a certain level of strength, he couldn't compete against the youngsters. After running for a while, he began to pant. Your Majesty, let me carry you on my back, Lyndon urgently said as he squatted down. Balthazar didn't hesitate and climbed onto Lyndon's back. Lyndon was the chief of guards and an innate grandmaster. Hence, carrying Balthazar was nothing much to him. With Balthazar on his back, Lyndon rushed madly through the secret passage. The rebels chased relentlessly, but they couldn't catch up with his pace. When Lyndon brought Balthazar to the exit of the secret passage, he opened the mechanism. The stone door slowly opened, but the footsteps and shouts from behind were getting closer. Both Lyndon and Balthazar were anxious. The stone door was only half open when Lyndon rushed out with Balthazar on his back. They finally came out, only to find the rebels had already surrounded them outside. Quinton personally led the troops and waited outside. Seeing this, Lyndon and Balthazar knew that they couldn't escape. They were trapped with enemies on both sides. Escaping seemed almost impossible. Your Majesty, I've been waiting here for a long time. With gunshots everywhere, I suggest it's better for your Highness to come with me to avoid any accidents, Quinton said with a smile. Balthazar remained composed. He stared at Quinton and asked, Quinton, Diatoran has never mistreated you. You're a senior general and a step away from being a champion. Why would you betray the country? Your Highness, the current situation of Diatoran is very clear. Enemies have surrounded us from all 4 directions, and we won't last long. Resistance is pointless. As long as you go with me to Filran, not only can you survive, but you can even assume a position even if Diatoran falls, Quinton explained. Foolish. I'm the king of Diatoran. How could I join Filran? Diatoran is vast and rich, with outstanding talents. We can definitely repel the enemies, Balthazar said firmly. Your Highness, it seems like you're not clear about the current situation. Even if Diatoran has many talented individuals, it doesn't matter because Astronia, Vadesia, Estrya, and Filran have launched an attack on us at the same time. It may not be now, but we eventually will lose, Quinton said. Shut up, Quinton. You're a traitor. I'll give you a chance now. I'll forgive you if you surrender immediately, Balthazar said fiercely. Your Highness, do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? My actions are enough to be executed 100 times. I have no other choice now. Quinton said with a sinister look. Now, he had no way out. "Quinton, you're a traitor, I'll kill you today!" Lyndon picked up the gun in his hand, preparing to shoot. However, Quinton's subordinates were already on guard. They dared not shoot easily. They couldn't afford the consequences if they accidentally harmed the king, so they could only rush forward with knives. Then, the stone door behind the secret passage was opened, and many more rebels rushed up from behind. They surrounded Lyndon and Balthazar. Distracted, Lyndon found the gun in his hand had been knocked to the ground. He immediately fought with the rebels. After all, Lyndon was powerful. He was not at a disadvantage when facing dozens of rebels. "Kill Lyndon, and then take the king away," Quinton shouted loudly. He knew Lyndon was formidable, so he wanted a quick resolution. The rebels launched a frenzied attack on Lyndon. "Your Highness, retreat quickly," Lyndon shouted while fighting. But Balthazar was already in danger, and he had no way to retreat. Lyndon couldn't concentrate fully on battle because he was worried about Balthazar. Soon, he was injured. Quinton's subordinates weren't easy opponents since some of them were eternal grandmasters. "Stop!" Balthazar roared when he saw Lyndon getting injured. If not for the fact that Lyndon was protecting him, these people wouldn't hold a chance against Lyndon. The rebels were startled when they heard Balthazar's shout and immediately stopped. Although Balthazar was surrounded, he still possessed an imposing air. The rebels, who were already uneasy, were stunned by his shout. At this moment, Balthazar suddenly took out a dagger from his waist and placed it at his own neck. Upon seeing this, everyone was shocked. Quinton's plan was to capture Balthazar alive and then hand him over to Filrin. If Balthazar died, how could he negotiate with Filrin? How could he threaten the 5 war gods? "Your Highness, you can't." Lyndon was extremely frightened when he saw that Balthazar was about to take his own life. "I am the king of the country. I won't be a hostage in the enemy country." Balthazar had accepted death as his fate. He knew that if he was captured, the 5 war gods would be threatened, and Diatoran would be in danger by then. "Your Highness, don't! I'll rescue you," Lyndon said urgently. "Don't stop me. If I'm captured by Filrin, the 5 war gods will be in a bind. If I die here, Diatoran's millions of brave warriors will definitely fight to the end. Even jerks like Quinton won't escape," Balthazar said indignantly. "Your Highness, why are you forcing me to the extreme?" Quinton shook his head. "Quinton, you jerk. Everyone in Diatoran will despise you. You're not worthy to be a Diatoranian," Balthazar said angrily. "If you die now, Lyndon will die, too. I won't harm him if you're willing to go with me. I don't need to elaborate on which choice is smarter, right?" Quinton knew that Balthazar cared deeply for his subordinates, so he used Lyndon's life to threaten him. "Quinton, what do you mean? Are you threatening me?" Balthazar's face darkened. "Your Highness, how can you say that? I'm just thinking about your well-being," Quinton answered. "Please, Your Highness, come with me." Chapter 537 Sworn Defense. Balthazar couldn't be bothered with Quinton any longer. Instead, he looked at Lyndon and said, "Lyndon, I absolutely cannot fall into the hands of the enemy. I hope you understand. Your Majesty, whether I live or die doesn't matter. But Diatoran cannot be without you." Lyndon didn't want to see Balthazar end his life and tried to persuade him. "I'm just an ordinary person. Diatoran can stand strong even without me. I have instructed Lord Caspian to be the next king of Diatoran in case of any mishap," Balthazar said. "Your Majesty, Lord Caspian is indeed strategic and capable, but he still has shortcomings," Lyndon said. "Caspian was only in his 20s. If he were to become the king, he was bound to be somewhat inexperienced at that job. Lyndon, don't you understand? If I fall into the hands of these people, the 5 war gods will undoubtedly rush to my rescue and neglect the border. When that happens, Diatoran will be in an even more dangerous situation because of me. I will never allow such a thing to happen," Balthazar said. "Your Highness, I understand. I'm not competent enough to save you," Lyndon said, somewhat self-blaming. "It's not your fault. It's all because of that bastard Quinton. In any case, I cannot fall into the hands of the enemy. Even if I die, I cannot let Quinton's plan succeed," Balthazar said firmly. "Then I will follow you, Your Majesty. I will not live like a coward." Lyndon also took out a dagger and placed it at his neck. Seeing this, Balthazar couldn't help but feel moved. Quinton waved his hand, and the rebel forces rushed forward, snatching the dagger from Balthazar's hand and taking control of him. Lyndon, who planned to commit suicide, turned pale when he saw this. "Your Majesty," he shouted loudly and rushed out, wanting to save Balthazar. However, the enemy was well prepared and immediately blocked Linden. Moreover, he was already injured, and his strength had decreased. He was also captured after a few rounds. "Damn it! Are you all tired of living? How dare you capture me?" Balthazar roared in fury. "Tie him up and take him away!" Quinton waved his hand as he gave the order. Now, there was no turning back. "Quinton, you traitor! I will personally kill you!" Balthazar roared in anger. Immediately after, he was tied up by Quinton's subordinates. "Your Highness, it's better if you think of yourself first," Quinton said with a smile. "Do you think the 5 war gods will spare you? When the time comes, you will die without a doubt," Balthazar added. "Ha ha ha, of course, I won't give them a chance. I will immediately hand you over to Filren," Quinton sneered. "Take him back and detain him." South Aridlands War Zone. Caspian had already ordered the North Aridlands army to rush to West Aridlands. In these situations, they had to use fighter jets to reach there as soon as possible. Caspian was ready as he led the armored battalion to West Aridlands. Upon learning the situation, Macy also requested to go with Caspian. Caspian didn't refuse. "Commander, something big has happened." Benjamin hurriedly came to the airport. "Champion Benjamin, what happened? Why are you in such a hurry?" Caspian asked. "I've received the latest news that none of the king's guards survived. The king and Chief Gorp have both been captured," Benjamin said. "I've already anticipated this situation," Caspian said with a calm expression. "Commander, I'm afraid you won't make it in time. It would be troublesome if the king has fallen into the hands of Filren." Caspian nodded as he acknowledged Benjamin's point. "Contact Ferb. I want him to do something," he said. Benjamin nodded and immediately dialed Ferb's phone. "Hello. I am the Diatoranian god of war, Caspian," Caspian said straightforwardly. Upon hearing that it was Caspian who called, Ferb became extremely excited. He also got news about Balthazar being captured and was preparing to assist the situation. "Lord Caspian, what can I do for you?" Ferb asked. "The king has been captured by Quinton's rebels. I want you to take your men to West Aridlands Airport at once. Don't allow any planes to take off from there," Caspian ordered. "Lord Caspian, I should move out to rescue the king now." "Why do you want me to go to the airport?" Ferb asked with some confusion. "You only have 100,000 troops. That's not enough to defeat Quinton. You'll just risk your life by going. Quinton wants to take the king to Filren, and he will certainly use fighter jets. I have already ordered the North Aridlands troops to back you up. Besides, I will also take the armored battalion from South Aridlands and fly there," Caspian explained his plan. "I understand. Rest assured, I will guard West Aridlands Airport," Ferb said firmly. "Regardless, you must stand by at the airport. Otherwise, you'll face the death penalty," Caspian instructed. "Understood," Ferb said excitedly. Afterward, Caspian hung up the phone and boarded the fighter jet with Macy. As the Diatoranian god of war, Caspian had to save the king. West Aridlands. Upon receiving Caspian's instructions, Ferb immediately ordered his troops. "Soldiers, Lord Caspian has ordered us to take control of the airport. This way, Quinton's rebels won't be able to take the king out of the country." "Yes!" The soldiers were instantly motivated when they heard that Caspian had given them the order. Although they were far in the west, they had heard of his prestige. Caspian was a myth in the military and an idol in the hearts of all soldiers. "Charge to West Aridlands Airport immediately," Ferb gave the order. Everyone rushed forward without stopping and headed straight to the airport. Quinton led his elite troops and the king to the airport. Meanwhile, Ferb was speeding toward the airport with his troops. As soon as he arrived, a chaotic battle broke out. Quinton was very worried that news of the king's capture would lead to reinforcements. Therefore, he only arranged a group of soldiers to guard the airport. Fighter jets were undoubtedly the best for maneuver, making the airport a crucial strategic asset. However, he didn't anticipate Caspian would order Ferb to attack the airport. Ferb, with his 100,000-strong troops, began a frenzied assault. The one group of soldiers left by Quinton was no match for Ferb. In just 30 minutes, Ferb wiped out all the defending forces at the airport. After occupying the airport, he immediately entered a state of high alert. The news that the airport was occupied would soon spread. Quinton would undoubtedly use fighter jets if he wanted to hand Balthazar over to Filren. Hence, he would surely bring people to fight for control of the airport. Chapter 538 God War. Ferb knew that West Aridlands Airport was a crucial place at the moment. Since the airport was now occupied by Ferb's troops, it would be extremely difficult for Quinton to take Balthazar out of Diatoran. To save Balthazar, they needed to keep Quinton in the West Aridlands. Quinton was about to head to the airport with Balthazar and Lyndon. Just then, an adjutant rushed over and urgently reported, "Report! Ferb has taken control of the West Aridlands airport." "What? Why did Ferb suddenly go to the airport?" Quinton was surprised. "We just received news that Ferb and his 100,000 troops have taken control of the airport," the adjutant replied. "Damn it! Didn't I make him go to the border? Why did he suddenly come back?" Quinton asked with some confusion. "I'm not sure. Ferb was heading to West Aridlands initially, but he suddenly turned back halfway," the adjutant reported. Upon hearing the news, Balthazar also felt something was amiss. He had instructed Ferb to come and rescue him, so why did Ferb go to the airport? At that moment, Balthazar suddenly understood what happened. It had to be Caspian's orders. Without Caspian's command, Ferb would never dare to change his strategy. Initially, when Balthazar was surrounded at the residence, he urgently ordered Ferb to lead his troops back. Now that he was captured and had no defending army left, Ferb's return would be pointless as his forces were only half of Quinton's. Caspian must have considered this situation and immediately changed the strategy. "Call Jake immediately and tell him to reclaim West Aridlands Airport," Quinton angrily ordered. Jake Winder was a general officer and Quinton's trusted aide. His troops were stationed near West Aridlands Airport. Quinton's plan to take Balthazar out of Diatoran by air was now ruined. He couldn't go by land or water as it was too slow, and anything could happen. "Understood." Upon receiving the orders, Jake immediately led his troop and headed to West Aridlands Airport. The news of Quinton's betrayal and the capture of Balthazar had also reached the border. The West Aridlands champion, Dax, got wind of the situation. "How dare Quinton, that jerk, touch the king? Is he tired of living?" Dax exclaimed in anger. "Champion, the border situation is critical. With the king being captured, what should we do next?" a deputy asked. "Since the king is captured, the immediate priority is to rescue His Highness. Issue an immediate order to assemble all troops and save the king," Dax instructed. When Staff Officer Stephen Zins of West Aridlands heard this, he immediately said, "Champion, we absolutely cannot do that. Officer Zins, what's wrong with me wanting to save the king? The situation is tense between us and Philin. If we withdraw now, we will simply be letting the enemy in. By then, Diatoran will be in danger," Stephen said. "If the king is taken away, what's the point of us guarding Diatoran?" Dax argued. "While rescuing the king is urgent, it's also important to protect the border. We must come up with a foolproof plan," Stephen said after contemplating. "What's the plan, then?" Dax asked. There wasn't much time to think as the situation was urgent. "We should gather a group of soldiers and go rescue the king. Others will continue to hold the line here," Stephen suggested. "Quinton is a senior general with 200,000 troops. A group of soldiers might not be enough to fight his troops off." Dax frowned. "Champion, you're right. But now, Philin's elite forces are fully deployed. Defending against them is already a challenge. If we pull out too many troops, sending out a group of soldiers would be like sending them to their death. We must gather all our forces to rescue the king," Dax declared. "Lord Caspian must have known about the news of the king's capture. He surely has a solution," Stephen suddenly exclaimed. Caspian was the Diatoranian war of God. He definitely wouldn't stand idly by after learning the news. "The king is in trouble now. As the West Aridlands champion, I have a duty and an obligation to save His Highness. Lord Caspian is far in South Aridlands, and time is running out," Dax urgently stated. He knew Caspian was powerful, but the situation was critical. Caspian is the successor appointed by the king. Now that His Highness is in danger, Caspian is the one that we should refer to. "Let's first consult Lord Caspian's opinion before taking action," Stephen suggested. Dax nodded, feeling that Stephen's words made sense. Soon after, he dialed the phone to South Aridlands. "I am West Aridlands champion, Dax. Where's Lord Caspian?" The intelligence officer in South Aridlands answered the call and quickly let Benjamin take over. "Champion Dax, I am Benjamin, the North Aridlands champion. Lord Caspian has left South Aridlands." "Are you looking for him?" Benjamin asked. "The rebels have captured the king. I want to get Lord Caspian's opinion on what we should do next." "If Lord Caspian isn't in South Aridlands, has he gone to the front line?" Dax asked with confusion. Lord Caspian has taken a fighter jet and rushed to West Aridlands. He also leads a great number of armored battalions, and now the forces from North Aridlands are on their way as well, Benjamin said. I didn't expect Lord Caspian to act so soon. I can be at ease now. Dax was surprised. It turned out that Caspian had already begun his actions, which Dax hadn't expected. Yes. Lord Caspian has ordered Ferb to guard West Aridlands Airport. If you want to assist, just send a group of soldiers to the airport and await Lord Caspian's. Dax relaxed a little after hearing Benjamin's words. Caspian had already deployed a well-thought-out plan, and now he just needed to cooperate. I've received the latest news. Ferb has taken control of the airport, and the situation is favorable for us, Dax said excitedly. Good! But we can't be careless. Quinton will never give up easily. He definitely wants to use a fighter jet to take the king out of Diatoran, so the airport is crucial, Stephen replied. I understand. I will immediately assemble half of my elite forces to provide support at the airport, Dax said. No. The situation in West Aridlands is critical. Filren is using everything they have to attack the border. Holding the line is already very difficult. If we withdraw half of the elite forces now, West Aridlands might fall, Stephen stated. Champion Benjamin, what do you suggest? What should I do now? Dax asked. He was in a dilemma as he was unsure what to do. Chapter 539 Urgent Situation. In my opinion, you only need to deploy one corps. Your forces can join Ferb to be on standby at the airport for Lord Caspian, Benjamin suggested. Dax was somewhat surprised. Unexpectedly, Benjamin's idea matched Stephen's. I'm a bit worried. One corps might not withstand Quinton's army. He has a massive force of 200,000 soldiers, Dax urgently stated. But you cannot abandon the West Aridlands border. Once you lose too many forces, you won't be able to withstand Filren's invasion, Benjamin said. Dax also knew that Benjamin's reasoning made sense. But what if the plan failed? Wouldn't he be a criminal? It's indeed challenging, but I can hold on for a while. However, for now, we must secure the airport. Only then Lord Caspian can land safely, and Quinton won't be able to leave Diatoran, Dax said. How about deploying two corps? This way, it won't affect the situation in the West Aridlands and will ensure enough forces to defend the airport. Benjamin offered a suggestion. All right, I'll give the order immediately, Dax said before he hung up the phone. He immediately dispatched two corps to head to West Aridlands Airport and assist Ferb. West Aridlands Airport. After Ferb had seized control of the airport and set up the defense, Jake charged toward them with his forces. As soon as they faced each other, a fierce battle erupted. Fortunately, Ferb was well prepared, and Jake was no match for him. Since both were general officers, their forces were also similar in size. However, despite Jake's prolonged attack, there was no progress. This news quickly reached Quinton's ears. Idiot, Jake is useless. After attacking for so long, he can't even win, Quinton angrily exclaimed. General Hans, the West Aridlands Airport is a crucial location. What should we do? Don't panic. Ferb is just a general officer. He only has 100,000 soldiers. Send someone to kill him, and all is well, Quinton said calmly. The 5 war gods and the soldiers know about our betrayal. They should know that the king is captured, too. Reinforcements are coming at us from all directions. With our limited forces, we can't spare anyone to kill Ferb, an adjutant explained. I'll personally lead my troops to eliminate Ferb. As long as we take control of the airport, we can leave immediately. After saying this, Quinton didn't hesitate at all. He immediately assembled his troops and charged toward the airport. At this moment, the 2 corps dispatched by Dax had arrived at Dimfell Passage. To enter the West Aridlands War Zone, they had to pass through here. However, Quinton had left 1 squad of his troops here. The 2 corps under Dax launched a direct attack. However, the terrain at the Dimfell Passage was treacherous, making it hard for them to gain victory. Back at West Aridlands Airport, Ferb had defeated Jake's forces. But just as he thought he could catch a breath, Quinton arrived with a large force. Ferb's soldiers had no time to rest. Immediately after the intense battle, they now had to face Quinton. The situation had become tricky for them. Quinton was a senior general. Hence, his soldiers were elite with advanced weapons. Ferb had already suffered some losses. Hence, confronting Quinton now was practically impossible. General Zonia, the rebels have too many people. We're no match for them. A deputy general hurriedly approached. We must protect this place at all costs. Otherwise, the king will be taken away. Before Lord Caspian arrives, we must defend this place to the death. Ferb's strict order. The only way Quinton was going to leave here was over their dead bodies. The soldiers were fired up after hearing Ferb's words. They knew that Caspian was about to arrive in West Aridlands, and that backups were also on the way. Caspian was the Diatoranian god of war, one of the 5 war gods, and also a myth in the soldiers' hearts. In their view, as long as Caspian appeared, there was no battle they couldn't win. The soldiers now had hope and began to fight courageously. Morale was important to a military unit after all. Although Quinton's forces were numerous, Ferb had set up defenses near the airport, coupled with air support. This caught Quinton's forces off guard. However, his forces weren't to be underestimated. They used a lot of missiles and shot down several fighter jets. Seeing the intense situation, Balthazar felt a pang of pain. These young people are all citizens of Diatoran. They're the soldiers of Diatoran. But because of Quinton, we have to fight each other, Your Highness. These traitors can hardly be called soldiers of Diatoran. They're not worthy enough, Lyndon said with resentment. You don't understand. These soldiers are innocent. They merely follow their superiors' orders. They didn't dare to disobey Quinton's instructions. Otherwise, they would be killed. It's all Quinton's fault. He's the one responsible for this. Balthazar gritted his teeth. Your Highness, your kindness is boundless. They've betrayed you, and you still care about their well-being, Lyndon remarked. The mastermind is Quinton. It's a pity for these soldiers. They originally wanted to be loyal to their country and defend against enemies. But due to Quinton, they are now fighting against their own comrades. I would personally kill Quinton if I could, Balthazar said. Lord Caspian is already on the way. As long as we can hold this place, we can definitely reverse the situation once Lord Caspian arrives, Lyndon excitedly exclaimed. I hope so. If Ferb manages to hold on here, I will surely promote him, Balthazar stated. West Aridlands Airport was filled with the sounds of gunfire, and many people were killed in the bombings. Ferb was fighting desperately, but his forces were limited. Quinton's troops weren't to be underestimated. Hence, the situation had become very unfavorable for him. At Dimfell Passage, the rebels who were originally stationed at Dimfell Passage were in shambles under the powerful attack of the 2 corps. They were well aware of the consequences of treason. Initially, they had no intention of betraying the country, but they had no choice once Quinton gave his order. As Dimfell Passage was surrounded, the leader had to call an emergency meeting and decided to yield, allowing the 2 corps to pass. Quinton's forces initiated a fierce new round of attacks. Just as Ferb's forces were about to get defeated, a large number of troops appeared out of nowhere and charged toward the battle. Chapter 540 Lord Caspian's arrival in West Aridlands. The large group of troops was the 2 corps sent by Dax. Quinton became flustered as he was caught in a pincer attack. Soldiers, backups are here. Let's launch a counterattack, Ferb shouted as he raised his arm. The soldiers were instantly motivated when they saw the reinforcements. Regaining their courage, they initiated a counterattack. Balthazar felt a mix of emotions when he saw the 2 corps arriving from the West Aridlands border. The situation at the border is critical, and Dax has deployed 2 corps. I wonder if he can withstand Filrin's attack. Balthazar expressed his concern. Your Majesty, your safety is the top priority now. Even if we lost the battle at the border, we can find a way to reclaim it, Lyndon suggested. Hopefully. I hope the war can be quelled soon, Balthazar answered. Quinton was a senior general with extensive command experience, so he was quick to calm down. Change formation immediately. One group attacks head-on, and the other blocks the reinforcements from behind. We must reclaim the airport. Quinton calmly commanded the battle. His subordinates immediately split into 2 groups. Although Dax's 2 corps were powerful, they lacked in numbers and couldn't fight them head-on. So, they could only delay Quinton's assault. Ferb's 100,000 soldiers had been engaging in battle non-stop and had already suffered significant losses. Now, there were only 50,000 soldiers left. Quinton redirected half of his forces, which was about 100,000 soldiers, to attack Ferb's troops. Just as Ferb's forces were on the verge of collapse, hundreds of aircraft appeared from the north. Seeing this, Balthazar, Lyndon, Ferb, and all the soldiers were greatly excited. They knew that the Diatoranian god of war had arrived. Indeed, these aircraft were reinforcements from the North Aridlands border. The main force was on military transport planes behind, as the fighter jets were faster. Since Caspian was late to take action, and was based in the southeastern part of Diatoran, he would be arriving a little later. The North Aridlands forces hovered over the airport and took a clear look at the situation. Afterward, they began a bombing campaign. When Quinton saw the arrival of the aircraft, he panicked. "Retreat! Head to 10B Passage!" Quinton immediately ordered once he saw the unfavorable situation. If he were to take the airport by force now, it would only result in heavy losses. It was almost impossible now to leave by aircraft. His only option was to take 10B Passage. The defending guard at 10B Passage was named Logan Massey. Since there weren't many guards at 10B Passage, Quinton planned to escape from there. When the rebels heard Quinton's command, they immediately retreated. The aircraft hovering over the airport stopped bombing as they knew Balthazar was in the hands of the rebels. Now, they could only land and wait for an opportunity. Dax's 2 Corps also dared not act recklessly. If they pushed the rebels too hard, Balthazar would be in danger. It was difficult for them to save Balthazar. They needed direct command from Caspian. The 2 Corps and Ferb's troops remained in place as they waited for Caspian's arrival. Quinton led the rebels and began heading toward 10B Passage. Half an hour later, 10 fighter jets arrived from the southeast. Seeing these fighter jets, everyone became extremely excited. They knew that the Diatoranian god of war had come. The 10 fighter jets landed at the airport. A robust man, full of powerful air, walked out. Accompanying him was an outstanding, well-built woman. The man was the leader of the 5 war gods, Caspian. Meanwhile, the woman beside him was Macy. "Greetings, Lord Caspian!" All soldiers shouted in unison as they saluted. Caspian's gaze was fiery as he looked around at the current situation. There were many corpses on the ground, indicating that a fierce battle had taken place. "Where is that jerk Quinton?" Caspian asked. "Lord Caspian, Quinton took the king hostage and headed to 10B Passage," Ferb replied. Upon hearing this, Caspian's expression turned grim. He had some knowledge of 10B Passage. The defender in charge was Logan, who was also the current head of the Massey family. Caspian suddenly remembered that the Massey family had come to him before. Could Logan be his biological father? However, Caspian had no intention of dwelling on these matters now. "Why didn't you chase after them?" Caspian asked. Reporting to Lord Caspian, the king was taken hostage by Quinton. "We were afraid that pressing too hard might endanger his highness, so we dared not take unauthorized action," Ferb replied. Caspian nodded as he understood Ferb's dilemma. After all, the king's safety had to be the top priority. They might accidentally harm him if they were to give chase. Caspian glanced at the soldiers and noticed the presence of 2 corps from West Aridlands. He asked with some confusion, "Why did you leave the border?" Reporting to Lord Caspian, "Champion Dax ordered us to come here and assist General Zonia," replied the leader of 1 corps. "I see. Everyone has performed meritorious deeds today. You have all worked hard," said Caspian. "Lord Caspian, the king is still in the hands of the rebels. We feel guilty to receive your praise. It has been over 30 minutes since Quinton and his group left this place. Please give us the order to rescue his highness," Ferb pleaded. "All right. Form up immediately and head to 10B Passage. Eliminate Quinton and the rebels," Caspian commanded. The soldiers raised their arms and shouted, "Yes?" "Lock onto the position of Quinton from the air. Do not open fire to avoid harming the king," Caspian instructed. "Additionally, contact the defender of 10B Passage, Logan Massey, at once. Instruct him to fight off the rebels. He will be held accountable if Quinton and the others manage to leave Diatoran." "Yes, Lord Caspian." A vice-general immediately took action and contacted the guards at 10B Passage. Afterward, he started heading toward 10B Passage. The fighter jets also took off simultaneously, heading for the same location. At the same time, Logan received Caspian's command. When he learned that Quinton had kidnapped the king and was heading toward 10B Passage, he felt somewhat uneasy. "All personnel, attention! The rebels currently hold the king hostage and are attempting to break through 10B Passage. We must intercept them and not allow Quinton and others to leave Diatoran." Logan issued the command. "Yes!" the soldiers of 10B Passage shouted in response. "Commander Massey, Quinton commands nearly 200,000 troops, and we only have 20,000 here. I'm afraid we won't be able to resist their attack." A subordinate expressed his concern. "We must hold them back even if it means death," Logan said firmly. "Commander Massey, this is a suicidal mission," the subordinate worriedly remarked. "Lord Caspian has already given the order for us to defend this place at all costs. If we fail, we will face the death penalty, Logan declared.